What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is Stardust here. Welcome back to another Marvel's Avengers video here on the YouTube channel, and today we are going through Brian Wagner responding to people about the Crossbones villain sector. Now, if you don't know about this villain sector, essentially Crossbones, of course, was a boss fight within War for Wakanda, and people were pretty disappointed that you couldn't face him afterwards. Now, the Brown Bull asked Brian Wagner, many of us are curious as to why Crossbones was not featured as a villain sector, or even thrown in as a flashback mission for us to repeat. Can you explain the reasoning behind this, since the team went through all the effort of creating a model, voice acting for a single fight? Brian says, I see this question a lot. 1. Campaign/single player bosses are not the same as multiplayer bosses. A lot of work has to be done to make campaign bosses work in multiplayer. 2. Both Crossbones encounters in the story are tied to the environment. Sonic cannon first, turrets second. And then Brian goes on to say, 3. Some things being exclusive in the campaign is okay. Makes the campaign special. 4. Creating a model and recording VO for the campaign is only a fraction of total work needed to make a multiplayer boss fight. See 1. Could we make a Crossbones villain sector? Sure. See next. He then says, to create a Crossbones villain sector, we would essentially have to start from scratch. Set it up for multiplayer, build an environment, create new abilities. Since the others from single player wouldn't really work, at that point, it's not much more to make a new villain. Which I can understand that point, but I do think that when you are crafting a game that is dedicated to the live service model, I do believe that creating boss fights that only benefit single play is a little bit, I want to use the right words, not irresponsible, but maybe lack of, I'm not sure how to say it. I just think that potentially that's not the best idea for the game, and I think that was probably a waste of time to make a solo specific boss fight. But anyway, this is Brian communicating, and I still appreciate that quite a lot. So, Brian then goes on to say, if you swap Crossbones for Modok in those last tweets, it's the same thing. I want to bring Modok to Avengers Initiative, but need to do it justice. Same deal with single player versus multiplayer, and his single player encounter heavily involves the environment and switching heroes. That, I completely get. That is a total, yeah, I understand that. Also need a good narrative for why Modok shows up after what happens at the end of the campaign. None of these things are excuses, just explaining why it's not Control-C from campaign, Control-V in Avengers Initiative. Now, with the narrative side, I can understand what Brian is saying, but I remember that Miller leaked a voice thing from a while back with Hank Pym talking about Modok popping up as a clone. Done. You know what I mean? Like, in my opinion, when you use story beats such as cloning and time travel, then realistically, you can get away with quite a few things and just blame it on that. Brian said, one of the things I've been trying my FanFest 2 champion since I took over this role is how important adding new enemies and bosses is, and working to make that happen. Nothing to announce or talk about, but it is a huge part of what we're working towards. So hopefully, again, this is speculation, but just judging by this tweet, I would like to imagine that we're going to see a lot more bosses on this roadmap that will eventually come out. Brian then goes on to say, I'm assuming I'll get a few tweets saying, but why are you just realising this now? It's not a new realisation. We hear this loud and clear. When I moved into this role after the release of Spider-Man and Discordant Sound, we started discussing the next phase and how we restructure to build the content we want to next. The team that works on enemies/bosses spent the better part of the last year making various types of claw mercs, spider bots, and the different encounters of both normal and elite in Discordant Sound. So there we go. So then someone goes on to ask about, like, this is a weird question, but I thought I'd add it anyway. So they say, is there any way of giving the Avengers game a similar experience to the Guardians of the Galaxy game? Like, instead of it being single player, to make it more of a co-op story mode for multiplayer that plays out like episodes. Obviously, Brian said, no, that kind of changes the core foundation of the game entirely, you know what I mean? So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. So that is what Brian was talking about on Twitter when it comes to why we don't have a Crossbones villain sector, and as well as why we don't have a Modok villain sector at the moment. Now, I know that Brian did talk about this a little bit in the past, but this goes into a lot more detail, and personally, obviously, Brian, you know, he obviously knows what he's talking about, guys, so as much as this might not be information that you genuinely want to hear, you've got to at least respect that we have an answer to these things, and it's up to you guys whether or not that you're okay with it or not. but always be respectful. And of course, when it comes to me, I'm just here giving the news. So thank you guys for watching this video. I'm currently working on another one right now that involves good friend Miller, and I will see you guys in a bit. Peace.